Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another opening door of the Mothman podcast. Tonight's podcast is coming to you on August the 17th, 2019. And Amanda, I don't know about you, but this week I felt like there's as you would say in Star Wars, there was a disturbance in the Force with all this violence that we've had over the last few weeks. In the last week or so.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you feel like, are we looking at possible paranoia activity in the future at these sites because of so many people that
were killed violently? Yeah.
At that location, and maybe there's still a lot of unfinished business left in the world because they were brought to their end in a violent way.
I think anytime you have a series of violent episodes like that, there is a force of evil behind it. And unfortunately, as a lot of people know, when there's a violent, sudden death, a lot of times that can lead to a trapped soul. And that person doesn't necessarily pass on the way they should. And yeah, I'm definitely concerned about some of these areas. Like, are we going to have a large amount of people trapped? I know as a medium, one of our tasks is to try to pass people on, to encourage them to go to the light. And we do that through meditation. Sometimes we participate together. I know when there was the Vegas shooting, there was a group of us that chose a time and a date, and we meditated and tried to really pass some of those people on. And I think that needs to be done definitely for El Paso and Dayton, Ohio. So yeah, those are definitely some considerations. And I think the kind of the paranormal evil force behind it is something that we really need to think about in this country and what we can do to change that. And, I don't know if you know, there was I think it was about 10, 15 years ago, there was a group of monks that, there was like about 100 of them that converged on LA, and they meditated for peace and, happiness and these kind of things in the world. And they measured a significant drop in violence that night. And of course, people are saying, oh, well, you can't prove it was them. No, but if you get enough people thinking about positive love and peace, I think it really can make a big difference in the world.
I agree 100%. And, one guy made a statement not too long ago. I heard him on the radio and said, let there be peace and let it start with me. And that's the mentality that we need to go forward with.
Definitely.
In this day and time.
Yeah.
Now, you were mentioning to me prior to the show about a feeling that about a person that may not have died.
Yes.
Or if he did die, his spirit's still hanging here
and it's kind of not a person we want hanging around. That's Jeffrey Epstein. The morning that the story broke, I read the headline. It said, Jeffrey Epstein commits suicide in prison, and I was like, I paused for a minute, and I was like, he's not dead. I can still feel his energy. And then I was like, am I crazy? So I actually went on Reddit and my group of medium friends and just said, hey guys, what are you guys feeling about this? And 100% of the mediums that responded said, I don't know what it means, but I do feel his energy. So yeah.
It's one of those things that we just and my other feeling on that is we don't want that.
It was funny. One lady said, it could be that his energy is stuck here. And somebody else responded, well, if he's stuck, I'm not helping him pass through to the light.
He's just going to have to hang around, right?
That's right.
That's right. All right. Amanda, you've chosen the topic for tonight, and ladies and gentlemen, every week that we are doing a podcast, we're going to have a special topic that we're talking about, and so we hope that you enjoy tonight's topic. But she's put a lot of work in on this topic, and so I hope you guys enjoy what she's planning to bring to the podcast for tonight.
Thanks, Mr. Mothman, and I really appreciate you bringing me back to the show. I really
well,
enjoy
it's
the
Daryl and
podcast.
Amanda now. It's the Daryl and Amanda hour now. So.
Good, I enjoy it, and I think we've got a great rapport. So I chose the topic of tulpas, and that's spelled Tulpa, tulpa, and the way that this topic came about for me. I was kind of I enjoy looking at psychology and videos on psychology online. And I was looking up because since I was a very young girl, about 5 or 6 years old, I've had a group of imaginary friends. And I have those imaginary friends to this day. That's not that unusual for a medium to have imaginary friends. I have questioned at times whether they are spirit guides or just imaginary. Not real sure sometimes. But looking up, why would an adult have an imaginary friend? I came across this idea of a tulpa. And the word tulpa is from Sanskrit, and it's a Buddhist concept. And it means thought form. And what they are you kind of imagine them, and at some point your tulpa speaks back to you. And so I was like, wow, that sounds a lot like my imaginary friends. I have 2 main friends who are always there with me that I discuss everything with, and they give me advice, and their responses seem to be unprompted. It's not me thinking their response. They say things in response to me that I wouldn't think of. And so it's kind of, it's a little confusing sometimes, they feel very real. And it also seemed to be very much like this idea of a tulpa. And so I guess some of the questions is, are we dreaming up these tulpas? Is it fulfilling our wishes? Is a tulpa a way to live a richer or fuller imaginative life? I'm not real sure on those things. So we're going to explore this topic and try to answer some of those questions.
Now, Amanda, this is not like, let's say, an evil side of a person and a good side of a person.
Right. It is not multiple personalities, or I think that's called dissociative identity disorder today.
Or multiple
personalities is what we've always known it as. I think that's the
old-timey version.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm old enough to be old-timey then. Because it's not a slipping into that personality. It's living your normal life with these invisible people alongside you. And those invisible people answer back as if they are sentient or self-aware themselves. They have their own lives. For example, one of mine, I'll just talk about the main guy that is in my life as my tulpa or imaginary friend, and his name is Albert. And Albert is 53 years old, and he is a businessman. He owns a lot of properties around the world, so sometimes he's out traveling. I know what he looks like. He's, got shaggy brown hair. He's kind of, sort of a hippie guy, but he's also really grounded, and he kind of watches over me all the time. If I'm having problems, we can discuss it. So
is he ever out of town when you're having a problem?
No. He flies back very quickly at the speed of light, apparently.
Okay. Well, you were talking about dreams, and we've got a little episode here about Alan Watts, and he called this episode, what if you went to sleep and died, and then we wake up. So I'm going to play that for the audience just to get a little insight into this whole Tulpa.
I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream at night any dream you wanted to dream. And you would, of course, be able to alter your time sense and slip, say, 75 years of subjective time into 8 hours of sleep. You would, I suppose, start out by fulfilling all your wishes. You could design for yourself what would be the most ecstatic life. Love affairs, banquets, dancing girls, wonderful journeys, gardens, music beyond belief. And then after a couple of months of this sort of thing at 75 years a night, you would be getting a little taste for something different. And you would move over to an adventurous dimension where there were certain dangers involved and the thrill of dealing with dangers. And you could rescue princesses from dragons and go on dangerous journeys, make wonderful explosions and blow them up, eventually get into contest with enemies. And after you've done that for some time, you'd think up a new wrinkle to forget that you were dreaming, so that you would think it was all for real and to be anxious about it. And then, because it'd be so great when you woke up, and then you'd say, well, like children who dare each other on things, how far out could you get? What could you take? What dimension of being lost, of abandonment of your power, what dimension of that could you stand? You could ask yourself this because you know you'd eventually wake up. And then you would get more and more adventurous, and you would make further and further out gambles as to what you would dream. And finally, you would dream where you are now. You would dream the dream of living the life that you are actually living today. That would be within the infinite multiplicity of choices you would have, of playing that you weren't God. Because the whole nature of the Godhead, according to this idea, is to play that he's not. So in this idea, then, everybody is fundamentally the ultimate reality. Not God in a politically kingly sense, but God in the sense of being the self, the deep down basic whatever there is. And you're all that, only you're pretending you're not.
Well, that was great in that he was using the dream world like you were talking about using the Tulpa world. Mm-hmm. He was talking about creating something that was going to be wonderful within your head to help you get along, and you're saying the same things.
Yeah, and I don't see, I think it only enriches your life to kind of create a more imaginative world that has more dimensions than just getting up and going to work every day. And when you can add those dimensions to it of living in not a fantasy, but enriching your life by seeing the world as more multidimensional than it is. And I think it also lends to kind of the idea of the law of attraction, that if you're thinking about and imagining good and wonderful things for your life, then you attract those good and wonderful things to you.
I agree 100%. Do you want to talk a little bit about the whole topic?
Of what a tulpa is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, the word means thought form. And basically it is an entity or person that is created in your mind. And the important point here is that it acts independently of your own consciousness. So they talk about like when you're creating a tulpa and you're thinking about it, you're visualizing it and seeing this person first, but that the tulpa becomes sentient or like self-sufficient and with their own consciousness when they start answering back to you. And people think that it's basically just imagination, but I'm telling you, if you try it, you do end up with a separate consciousness. And I don't know, maybe that's something that humans are uniquely gifted to do. We know that our minds are, a little different than the rest of the animal world. And so at first you're starting with imagination. And then you're kind of like building on it. You're visualizing this person, and it's a process. And a lot of people put a lot of time and effort into this. Some people say it takes weeks, months, even years. Now,
to interrupt your thought, I don't want to get you off track, but I've studied hypnotherapy from a school in Nashville, North Carolina, and went up there several weekends.
And I still want you to hypnotize me sometime.
Okay. So, I got the plaque on the wall, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
But I guess the bottom line is hypnotherapy would help anyone to help train their mind to create something like that. It teaches you how to open up your thoughts, how to go back into your consciousness, because in our conscious mind right now, you and I are thinking about this podcast. We're thinking about everything's going, go right. Don't make this paper move. Don't make this noise. Don't cough in the microphone. We're thinking about all this stuff. And so we're blocking out so much that we know and is hidden back there behind us. And that's the reason they say, in younger children, up until the years about 5 years old, they can get to parts of the brain that you and I can't get to anymore, because we've blocked them out for so many years that they're not there to be used. They're there, and we still have the memories there. We just can't go back through all those filters we've put in place over the years so we can concentrate on the now instead of the past. Okay, they're more open to the past than the now. Okay, they're in a learning stage. So hypnotherapy helps us to relax, open up that part of the mind that we can go back and pull out stuff that from our past that we can't realize what's going on now. Hypnotherapy is good in when you work with an accident victim. They see and hear things that they don't realize they see and hear. Okay. But if you can go back and open up their mind and get them relaxed enough to where they can go back and see that incident, just like when it happened, they can pull out facts and give to law enforcement that the normal person can't
like
do.
License plates
that they saw, and we just block it out. It's just we constantly block out things.
I was thinking of just an incident like that. I hit a deer one time, and it happened so fast that when we stopped the car, we were like, what was that? But then in my mind, I could sort of see a form, and it was really interesting because it was literally recalling something subconscious.
Right.
So
now,
cool.
My wife always accused me, hey, you didn't listen to what I had to say. There's a good chance that she probably did say it. There's some good chance she might not have said it, but there's a good chance she probably did say it, and that I was thinking and looking and doing so many other things that I heard, but I didn't.
You didn't process it.
Yeah, there you go. I didn't process it because I was concentrating on something else, and it might not be something that she realized I was doing because I might have been thinking something at work.
Right.
Some of the problems that we were having or something else that was on my mind and more prevalent than what she was actually saying. And I'm not saying what she say is not prevalent. It's just that there's so much there that you have to block out to really, and that's the reason, you need to write down things because, and my dad is 91 years old, and one of his traits is that when you say something to him, he writes it down.
Really?
Because he knows that he blocks out stuff. He knows that, and I'm not saying dementia. I'm just saying that he's got so much going on because he's 91 and still farms, and he's thinking about.
You told me he was out there farming.
Out there farming. So what I'm saying is, making a long story short, that hypnotism kind of helps you relax and brings this stuff back out.
Yeah.
So that would help too if somebody's really trying to create one in their mind.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, a lot of adults, are not as in touch with their imagination as they could be. And the imagination is powerful and it is uniquely human. And I think that's it's like one of our strengths. The reason humans have progressed is because we can imagine the future and we can imagine what would happen if we did this. And so people have used imagination in order to progress humanity. And it could be that tulpas are a further progression in our humanity because we're expanding our consciousness into a second consciousness. And I don't exactly understand how that works, but I just know that I came across this backwards because I already have these imaginary friends. I don't even remember creating them because I was so young. I was 5 or 6 years old, and I am now 42, and I still talk to people that I call them the people in my head. No one else can see them, but there's, like I said, 2 significant ones. There's about 5 or 6 of them. And then I come across the idea of tulpas, that this is something that goes back thousands of years that we've known we can do. And Buddhist mysticism has really encouraged the idea of a tulpa because it expands your consciousness and because it uses your imagination. And there's also an element of another self in a way that we call it a best friend, but it is also another consciousness that belongs to us in a way. I don't know how else to explain that.
I think you did very well. And to the audience, I've known Amanda for quite a while, and she's not crazy. She doesn't have people talking in her head. She uses it very wisely.
I try.
But we all have our ways of doing things, and you just brought up another thing that Amanda and I have been searching different topics about the tulpa, and we would like to play this tape because we found somebody that's taking this and taking it to another realm.
Wrong level.
So we want you to hear this tape and excuse us if we kind of make fun of him or we jump in and tell you this is not right. But everybody has their own opinions, and apparently this is this individual's opinion.
Well, here's an interesting takeaway. I mentioned this to you before, but this is something you should really look into. I am convinced now from the research that I've done that pretty much all of the phenomena that people experience in the world, all the way to religious experiences and demonic possession and all the phenomena that people experience all the world are due to the concept of what I will put.
First off, this guy's doing a podcast in what appears to be a restaurant in China.
Yep.
And you're going to hear all kind of sounds in the background. Now, I don't know why anybody want to do a podcast in a restaurant, but I guess, you do where you do, wherever you're at, right? So just bear with this tape and you kind of listen to it go. But I started off saying this is just not right. This guy's, you can't verify any statements he makes.
Under the umbrella of the term Tulpa, T-U-L-P-A. And a Tulpa is a concept from Tibetan mysticism that simply means a mind-made body. And this is very interesting because, in my opinion, from my perspective, it explains everything.
There again, his opinion.
And he said Tibetan mysticism. It's not Tibetan. It's Buddhist, which is a big difference.
Well, he's also not talking in Southern because I call it a Tulpa, and he calls it a Tulpa or something. Okay.
That all of the phenomena that people are having are basically creating these tulpas, where you're creating these thought forms that often can manifest physically, and they appear to take on a mind of their own and have their own entity, but someone created this. We're all creating stuff, and sometimes they get away from us. And it's like a circuit, like a loop running. And so that's why a lot of hauntings, when people see them and things like that, they do the same thing over and over again. And it's interesting because these...
Like a what? What does he say? What did he say there?
I don't know. I'm not sure what he said there.
These thought forms can take on such intricacy that sometimes they respond, like they have programmed responses, almost like an algorithm to different stimuli. So, for example, when different people, certain energy that they bring, the tulpa will respond in a certain way, and so it seems like it has an intelligence and a life of its own, but it's simply because a lot of times people that separate these things from themselves, and a lot of times it's unconsciously, they're also unconsciously creating an entire neural network of information for these things to operate. And some people do it intentionally. They create these mind-made bodies or tulpas on their own. But the point that I'm making is that I actually have gotten away from the belief that these disembodied entities are spirits from the afterlife coming back to haunt people. The afterlife is, and what happens to people.
So he's saying that
our body, when we die.
He's saying that a Tulpa is a
He's
spirit.
so confused.
Well, he's got me confused now too. So what he's saying is that we're making up spirits in our mind and bringing them back. Is that what?
Right.
Am I interpreting right there?
We're creating, basically he's talking about the phenomena of ghosts.
Right.
Spirits from the afterlife coming back. And he's saying, no, those aren't spirits. Those are tulpas, which is like a thought form. And we're responsible, and there's no such thing as the paranormal.
Okay, how does he? Well, I guess you know how he explains it, but
he doesn't.
we're looking at. He's saying that you can make this spirit be seen by 5 different individuals at 5 different times when you're not present.
Right? It doesn't even make sense.
Oh, that's some mind power there.
Yeah.
I'm convinced for now that we don't have time for this shit anymore. That people aren't coming back to do hauntings or fucking around with stuff. Like you get into a completely different level of consciousness, and although it may exist, they're not bothering to come back and interact with this shit. Once people die, they're like, oh my god, like why would I bother going back to that place? But we here on this plane, we're creating that stuff, and it seems like we're creating that. It seems like there are demons, and for all intents and purposes, they are demons. But another perspective I have on demons is simply that they're all of the negative traits and emotions and bad tulpas that people are creating in the world, and some people are doing it intentionally. And they're playing off of and using that belief system that people have about demons and disembodied entities and spirits as one form of control in this whole grid of control. It helps to perpetuate a belief system that helps.
Well, the only thing I agree with him about there is that, there is a lot of fake in our topic here. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, I've always said I don't believe and I don't disbelieve. I've been an investigator for over 40 years. I give you the facts and let you make up your own mind.
Right. Exactly.
I'm just saying that I have seen a lot of facts that I can't explain.
Yes.
So there's something there that I don't know and can't explain. So therefore, I just keep looking and I go forward with it. But I don't think I'm creating it in my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, when I go into a house or go in anywhere that you and I'll be going in the future, I go in blank. I don't care. It's like I told you before when I found that entity in the graveyard.
Yeah.
I had been so many graveyards, I hadn't found anything.
Right.
I wasn't going in there expecting to find anything.
Yeah.
And so when I found something, I was shocked.
Right.
And so, it's just...
and I just find it interesting that this guy thinks that he alone has got all of the paranormal figured out.
I guess that's the reason we like this tape.
Keep a lot of people in check. But it's very interesting that ever since I began to have this perspective, all of those things went away and they had no more control.
I guess he's trying to justify it in his own mind.
Those are just thought forms that appear to have a life of their own and they appear to come from the other worlds. But these are all fictions that are operating in this physical plane because people create them. People start having these ideas. They start reading certain books about ghosts, or they start getting scared about stuff, and the mind starts making these things up, especially through like optical illusions that happen to people. A lot of times what the mind does is that when it doesn't understand something, it creates a story behind, like, why am I seeing this thing that it looks like a body or a ghost, and then those things then build upon themselves, and sometimes they detach from people, or people intentionally detach these stories, and then people write books about it, and there's movies now, and that's why you even have like alien abduction stories, and nobody ever has any evidence of this stuff. It's happening to people, but
now I don't agree with that. I think there's a lot of evidence out there.
Oh yeah, especially for not even for abductions, but for aliens. Period.
Right, and but that's a whole different topic.
Oh yeah,
I mean it might fall in the realm of paranormal, but I think it's more in the realm of normal than paranormal.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, they're just simply mind-made by people. We're the creators of the aliens. We human beings are the creators of the ghosts. We're the ones that are doing this. A lot of time, it's interesting too that there's a lot of evidence that a lot of poltergeists and a lot of hauntings are actually attributable to people who it's happening to. There'll be like a child or somebody who's mentally disturbed, or anything that they are actually creating these effects because they either had some emotional disturbance or something else that's going on. And it's been found by a lot of researchers that once they deal with a certain person or they do a certain ritual, that's why sometimes exorcisms work, because you're dealing with the person who's actually creating it, and it's not the demon, but it seems like it. Like, there are a lot of people, for example, so in studying hypnosis, you'll find out that there are people who who have what's called dissociative personality disorder, which used to be called multiple personality disorder and things like that. And some people have confused with schizophrenia. But where people have multiple personalities, whereas, for example, in one personality they could be a woman, and another one they're a little boy, another one they're...
And going back to that, the medical treatment for someone like that is because this person didn't create it themselves. Their minds created it.
Exactly.
And their mind is taking over, where you control when we create.
And multiple personality disorder comes about because of severe trauma.
Yes, severe trauma. It's a whole different category than what we're talking about.
Yeah,
so
it
he's lumping everything into one category and sending it all under this topic.
Yeah.
So
and he brings up the idea of fear and how much he has been afraid of ghosts and things, and how now that He knows it's a tulpa. He's not afraid. So it almost seems like he needed a way to rationalize his own fear.
And I agree. You either believe or you don't believe. I don't think there's too much gray area in there.
Yeah.
And you're either afraid or you're not afraid.
Yeah.
It's just like my daughter wanted me to go into this graveyard out in the middle of nowhere with no lights or anything. And so I said, okay, let's go. Well, when we get there, guess what? I get out. Nobody gets out with me. So, I go in this graveyard and I didn't fear anything. I didn't think I was going to find anything, which I did, but I didn't. And the only thing about what I found was when I first found it, it was I didn't have the camera. I've got an SLS camera, and I didn't have the camera turned on. And so my son-in-law was one of those believers. Oh, it always happens off camera. And I'm going, oh God, it's happened off camera. so I was able to get the camera going, and then I was able to catch it there at the very end. But it's just like he's saying, you're afraid of this stuff. Well, not everybody's afraid of it.
No, and once I started communicating with departed people, I lost all fear. Like, go ahead and try to scare me now.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and I'm not saying that there's not things out there that will hurt you.
Right.
And I think that you need to be aware
Cautious.
Of that.
Yeah.
Yes. And my wife's always says, don't bring anything home.
Exactly.
And so,
yeah.
And one of our investigators, he always makes the same comment, don't bring anything home.
Yeah.
You can't, I don't know what causes something to attach to something or for whatever reason, I think that person or that thing, the entity, and I don't want to call it a thing, I'm calling it an entity, a spiritual being, electrical force. I'm just trying to make up.
Yeah.
I just don't want to say a thing. Okay.
Right.
A thing is not the right definition. So, it's attached to wherever it's at and whatever it's doing. It's not going to probably reattach to you.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, oh, good. I like this guy. I'm going home with him.
I know. It's like, no, it's not boring. Trust me.
I think whatever is causing it to be at that location is what's causing it to be at that location. Maybe, it's staying around because of guilt. It's staying around because of trauma, looking for something, an answer that wasn't fulfilled. There's always a reason
There's
for
something,
right,
yeah.
and I agree with you on that. So, so I don't really worry about bringing anything home.
Right,
it's one of those sorts of things. So I'll get back to this thing, right?
A man, and the interesting thing about that is that some people have demonstrated one person needs glasses, and when they shift to another personality, they have perfect eyesight. Or one person has diabetes, and when they shift into a different personality, they no longer have diabetes. Or it's even been demonstrated the mind is so powerful that you can put a quarter that's room temperature, a coin of any kind, on somebody's skin, and you talk to them and tell them that it's white hot or red hot with heat, and when you take it off, they'll have a burn mark on their skin. So the human body is interesting that it can move through states of disease and not disease. You can have diabetes in one state and then be normal, have normal blood sugar in the other one. You can have perfect eyesight in one and then be nearly blind in another state. You can have a room temperature coin cause burns on the skin. And so anyway, those are just some interesting things to consider, even to the point where there was a doctor who used hypnosis who this kid had elephantitis over almost all of his entire body, and he cleared up this dude's skin.
Now, I have to agree with you on this part. And here again, as I explained before, if a person can be hypnotized and can control, they can gain control of their brain. The brain is very powerful.
Yes.
And here again, I don't really think it's the mechanics of the physical brain. I think it's the energy which is produced in the brain. And it's what I call our soul. So if we die, that energy, leaves our body.
Right.
And you've heard me speak of this in prior podcasts, but this energy leaves the body. That energy is so strong, it can control this, what we call a body, or
I always wonder if, because I'm really into quantum physics, and I always wonder if at some level we're affecting the quantum world by our thoughts. Like, what if prayer or meditation or the law of attraction is just us moving some quantum particles in the right place or attracting them?
You cannot do any research into paranormal without going into the quantum theory.
This is true.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the key components of that quantum theory is energy, and energy cannot be created
or destroyed.
Yep. Okay. And what is our brain signals? It's proven
it's energy. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you can document that.
Yes.
It's scientifically documented. So I agree with you 100%. If you listen to our podcast and we go into different subjects, you're going to find us always coming back to the quantum theory.
Yeah.
It's going to be in there at some point during our conversation. We're going to bring up the quantum theory.
Right.
So I agree with that 100%. But here again, going back to his comments, it's true. And this is proven. And what he said here, you can prove because there's documented evidence of that.
Right.
So, but he's still lumping all this into the wrong topics.
Yeah.
That's what I'm concerned. I mean, not concerned with, but making fun of him.
He's throwing everything he's mentioning, he's calling a tulpa.
Right. And it's not right.
No, it's not.
So, you and I are trying to discuss this topic, and then this guy just starts lumping everything that we do and say, which should be covered under 10 or 15 podcasts into one podcast, and you can't do it.
That's an important point. Like, people need to know this is exactly what a tulpa is not.
Right.
So this is why we're kind of covering this part.
But most people don't even know what a tulpa is. Okay.
True.
So if you heard this tape, you're going to be very confused.
Yes, you would.
Okay. And that's one of the reasons I want to bring this to the surface is that this tape is just this guy's opinion.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
And like you said, everybody in the world's got an opinion.
That's right. But I just don't want people to be confused. And if they go back and start researching this is one of the first. If you type in, I'll get it out here in a minute. Type in tulpas and paranormal activity. You can pull up his tape.
Oh yeah, it's one of the first things that pops up.
And so it's just. Well, I see here it's only have 13 views, so we're not in trouble yet. But he's got it out there in some other forms too. So if you research it, you can find it under some other topics. But the key here is just I want people to know that this guy is not correct in his tape.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't elephantitis. I'm sorry. It's another skin disorder. I don't remember what it is now. I actually wrote about it. Sometimes when I write things, I get it out of my mind. But so, it's very interesting. Anyway, I'm still exploring that idea, but I just think it's fascinating. I'm not saying that it's the absolute truth and that it has to be even true, but it appears like that from my perspective, and especially the effects that it's had in my life where I no longer have issues with any external entities like giving me a scare or even having any negative influence on me ever since I started looking at that perspective. So I think it's fascinating. And on the haunting of the hospital and the different places that you may go to and have these things happening, it's not necessarily that there were demons throwing those porcelain things around or even demons in the normal sense of what people think they are, throwing a stretcher at Lausanne. Either your boyfriend at the time, he thought that there were demons, and so maybe even read stories about them and was doing rituals to try to conjure them. And when you do that, you actually do, because you're starting to read about their personalities and you're reading about the powers that they have and the things that they can do, and so you create a tulpa for that. Or people who were at the hospital before, maybe there was somebody who was there, people who have mental conditions, and I'll just leave with this because I got to go do my thing, but Dr. Andrew Weil in his book called The Natural Mind talked about how to the same extent that yes, I know, thank you, to the same extent that a negative psychotic person can be a burden to society, to that same extent, a positive psychotic can be an asset, and that the National Institutes of Health would be the last American institution to realize the positive potential of psychosis. He said a potential so overwhelming that he's willing to say that psychotics are the evolutionary vanguard of our species because they have the ability to change reality simply by changing their mind. And so it's very interesting that if you're in a hospital and there are people who have that ability, whether it be negative or positive, they can be an asset or a burden, they have this ability to change reality by changing their mind. They can create tulpas so powerful and leave them because that's what they believe. That's my thesis about...
Well, I'm going to end this interview right there because he's getting ready to go do his thing, whatever his thing is. He's correct in that you can heal yourself and you can... but it's not a tulpa. It's
right.
It's a completely different thing. He's lumping all this into one topic, which is the wrong topic.
Yeah,
that should be in a hypnotic state, maybe podcast that we can talk about.
He's covered psychology, medicine, all kinds of paranormal stuff, aliens, and he's called all of this tulpas.
Okay, so his definition of the tulpa is anything you make up, period.
Pretty much.
Yeah, okay.
So imagination is a tulpa. I mean, you can't tell a kid that. It's such a valuable resource.
Yeah, and like I said, I think I just want people to understand what a tulpa really is.
Yeah.
But I also want them to understand any positive has a negative, okay?
Yes.
And so I'm going to lead into yours negative. You got to be careful with whatever you do, whether it's hypnosis, whether it's creating something in your mind. You've got to be to be creative enough to know what's good and what's bad.
Yeah.
When I say creative enough, that's smart enough or whatever you want to use.
And cautious. And
there you go.
Understanding that there's a difference between creating something that you're using your imagination to create and conjuring something paranormal. And I think you see negative stories and you see positive stories online. And, I just really would caution anyone who wants to create a tulpa to make sure that we're using imagination. We're not conjuring a demon or calling forth something, whether it's even a good paranormal, let's say paranormal entity. Even if it is a good one, you don't want to bring up the dead or bring up a demon. You want to stick with your imagination. And like I said, I don't totally understand how that works, but it is a second consciousness almost. But there's a really, to me, this, if anything is kind of scary to me, this is definitely creepy. This was a story, that turned up online, and, it was actually one of the first places I ever heard about tulpas. And it's the story of this lady named Olivia Mabel. And she and her husband had a son, Aiden, and they lived in Salina, Texas, which is, north of Dallas. So the news reports that you can look up online, March 13 of 1990, Aiden was found drowned in a pond on their property. And as you can imagine, it was devastating for his parents. He was 7 years old. And Olivia and her husband began to have problems because of the death of the child, and the husband left. And Olivia refused to leave the house. She wasn't going to leave the house where she had raised Aiden until his death, and she had his ashes there with her, and she was just full of grief. So she pretty much withdrew from her family. She withdrew from social life. And eventually she totally stopped leaving her house. They said September 1991 was the last time friends and family saw her. So fast forward to February 27, 1994, and 911 received a kind of like a hang-up call. There was no one on the line, and then the phone just was hung up. And then that repeated again. It rang, and no one was on the line. They hung up. Well, as you probably know, when you call 911, your phone number and your address show up to them, and they can dispatch the police. So they did that, dispatched the police for a welfare check. Not sure what was going on. They go to this house, which was Olivia Mabel's house, and they tried to look through the windows. The windows had been painted black, which was kind of strange, and it just was really run down. So they break down the door and they go inside, and when they get in, they find that the whole house is just in a state. There was just dust and things were topsy-turvy and just a disaster. And it looked like, no one had lived there for, I don't know, forever, a long, long time. So they're searching room to room, and they come upon a child's bedroom. The child's bedroom was immaculate. It was clean. All the toys were put away in their little cubbies. The bed was made. It was tidy. It was, there was a lamp on, and they're looking around the room, and they see in a rocking chair, it turned out to be Olivia Mabel, and she was quite dead. They figured she had probably been dead a while. Later, the coroner said it had been 3 weeks. And in her lap, she had a kind of like a voodoo doll made out of sticks and wrapped in a little bit of like a child's clothing. And they were kind of freaked out about that. And then they look at the wall in front of the rocking chair where Olivia was sitting, and there was a sort of like a trunk, like a toy chest kind of thing, covered with a child's bed sheet. And there was a banner that hung in front of the altar, and the words were in Sanskrit. It was translated later. And there was like toys and candles and an urn of ashes, which was Aiden's, it turned out. The Sanskrit was translated to say construct or build, which is kind of like what the word tulpa actually means literally. It's like a thought construction. So that was all weird enough, but then things got even weirder. They find stacks and stacks of letters, like one a day kind of thing. And they all said things like, Aiden, Mama misses you so much. Please come back to me. Aiden, I'm so sorry. Please come back to your mommy. And as the police were going through the letters were getting weirder. And it's the last 3 letters were like, Aiden, I'm so sorry I let it get like this. Aiden, please forgive me. And then the final letter said, Aiden, I'm leaving. I will not let you keep me, you vile, vile creature. Mommy's coming for you, Aiden, my sweet Aiden, which is pretty weird. So the question the officers had was, well, who made the phone call? Because there was no one in the house, and Olivia had been dead for at least 3 weeks. So the story started kind of circulating, and people were talking about that. Oh, the Sanskrit banner, she was trying to construct a tulpa, and it could be that she constructed a negative tulpa, or maybe she brought back a soulless version of her child. It's really unknown, but she was trying to conjure a tulpa. So that was kind of the creepiest story I came across.
I agree with you. So it's like you said before, it can be a really good thing or it could really be a bad thing. Some psychologists believe that it's really a good mental health tool for some people to have somebody that they can confide in. There's some personalities out there that says that nobody understands me, nobody really wants to be with me, nobody wants to talk to me. This sort of Tulpa is a good person because it's their to go to person.
Right. Yeah.
So it's really good. I want to talk a little bit about how to create a Tulpa.
Yeah.
And one of the things I want to say is think long and hard before you create a Tulpa.
Definitely.
Your Tulpa will be a lifelong companion and will be with you for the rest of your life. Spend some time thinking about it, because if you change your mind after creating a Tulpa, you can get rid of them, but Tulpas are people with their own personality and thoughts.
Right.
Getting rid of a Tulpa is killing them, and that would mean you're killing a person. Making a Tulpa is no easy decision. Take your time, and if you really want to make one, make a good one.
Yeah.
So that's the planning stage. And so your next stage is what? Creating what it's going to look like?
Yeah. So like I said, this is not something you dabble with. You need to approach this carefully and understanding what you're creating. You're not conjuring the paranormal. You're not conjuring a demon. You're not calling forth anything. You're starting from your own imagination.
I know a lot of the sites that you can research and look into talk about planning the appearance, and you can draw it out, what you want this person to look like, or you can fantasize of what you want this person to look like in your own mind. But you need to create something that's going to be real to you.
Yeah.
And it's really funny, but some of the psychologists say if you create let's say if we created a robot, you got to tell this robot it's not real, okay?
Yeah.
Because it will. You can have it to form its own personality, and you can have it to form its own thoughts, but you got to let it know that it's not real. So if you're trying to create something that's not a person, you got to let that entity know that it's not a person.
Yeah.
And also plan your Tulpa's personality, right?
Right, absolutely. And you're planning someone who complements you and meets your needs. So it's almost like you're creating your own best friend, and you need to think that through. You need to think about, like, okay, do I want someone who is older and full of advice? Or do I want a peer who enjoys hanging out with me and going to the movies? Or you could even have a Tulpa that is your child. That do I want something I take care of? And you need to think about what your needs are and try to meet those needs through the way you create your Tulpa. So, you're imagining someone who is wise and maybe they have more experience than you in certain areas. How much older are they than you? Are they closer to your age, or are they significantly older, like your parents' age, or somewhere in between? The cool thing about a Tulpa is their focus in their purpose is you. So, it's someone that you can rely on, and you kind of want to think of it that way. Like, what would a person that I could completely confide in, completely rely on, what would that look like? And then, think about the aspects of their personality. What do they do for a job? Do they have a job? How much money do they have in the bank? Do they, what color's their car? What's their favorite color? What do they wear on average? Do they hate fish and love to eat Mexican food? what kind of person is this? You know, is this a person that's a lot like you, or is it a person that's a compliment to you?
Oh, that's great. One of the other things they talk about is visualize. How do you visualize? I'll get the word out here in a second. Y'all bear with me. Visualize your tulpa. Mm-hmm. Sit down and close your eyes. Imagine your tulpa in your head. Look at them from any possible angle you can think of. Try to visualize every detail of their appearance. Be patient and take time visualizing them. And remember that some part of it can be very different, such as a face. Also remember you can do this, many things with this tulpa as you want to, whatever you want it to wear. But visualize it, and it's going to take time. I believe one of the things you said, it could take anywhere from a few days to a few years.
Yeah.
So it's not something that you're going to sit down and do on a weekend. Okay, it's something you got to take your time and do it right if you're going to do it.
And you're there when your tulpa speaks back to you. That's when the tulpa has really become its own person, its own consciousness. And that's the goal. That's where you want to arrive at in order to have a good relationship with your tulpa. You really don't have a relationship with them until they are sentient. They're self-aware and conscious on their own.
So by that you mean try to feel their hair, the details of their body. You just want to maybe give it a scent. Have a special scent that you recognize, mm-hmm. and you want to visualize the movement that this tulpa will have, the way it walks, the gestures they use. So there's a lot of things, and once you get it to the point that it can talk,
mm-hmm.
talk to it, watch TV with it,
have deep conversations with it. Talk about your life.
Yeah, and after it learns to speak, you can even create its own voice.
Yeah.
So
I know with mine, like I really have an affectionate relationship with these people. I care about them, and there was even a point where I thought, oh well, this was back when I was like 18. Oh, I'm an adult now, and I shouldn't have imaginary friends anymore. But they didn't just go away. And I think that's important. Your tulpa is not going to just go away. Like Daryl was saying, to get rid of them is to kill them. And it's a really hard thing to do. I cannot imagine doing it. I mean, I plan to have my friends in my life the rest of my life, which is totally weird. I know. I'm kind of nuts, but that's okay.
And, that's what they're saying. Move it into reality. Have it walking with you, falling behind you. You can still feel that they're there and what they're doing, and see them with your eyes,
And you can feel their presence at a certain point. I don't know when that really happened, but I definitely feel their presence. But at the same time, I can also say, you know what? I really can't talk right now. You guys need to take off. And and they're gone, And
another way, excuse me, I'm getting choked here. Another way is visit the tulpa's forums. There's a lot of forums out there that you can visit and talk with other people who have them. And so you've got your own little world out there.
Yeah, maybe this is an advancement in human imagination.
There you go. Well, Amanda, I've enjoyed this evening with you.
Most definitely.
We've had a good topic. I think we've covered it pretty well.
Yeah.
If you're out there and you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email us at mothmanpodcast@gmail.com.
And if you're an adult with tulpa friends, let me know. I'm really curious who else has these and how pervasive it is.
So she can be reached at the same email address at mothmanpodcast@gmail.com. And be sure to tune in for our next episode. Thank you for listening. So as we leave, have a good night. And thank you for listening to Mothman Podcast.